Hello, hello, hello. So when I first joined Particracy in around 2022, I didn't really know a lot of people. I was just in my little clique. But over the next few years, as I started getting more and more people to know, I met this one dude, Iltam. And let's just get this right off the bat. His graphics are amazing. His logos, his flags, his dedication to his nation is wonderful. So, around 3 years later now, I thought, why not interview him? Why not get into why his graphics are so good, why he got into graphic design in the first place, and what brought him to Particracy, and what's future is looking like. So, without further ado, I'll probably just throw it to the interview. So, take it away. All right, I am here with Iltam, and would you like to give us a quick introduction before we start?
Sure. For what type of introduction?
Just anything, honestly. Just tell us
Oh, okay.
who you are and maybe what you do or something.
Okay, sure. Should I start now?
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess my name's Iltam. I've been playing the game for about like a year now that I think, but actually more like 2 years now that I think about it. Um, I'm a pre-med major studying in the state of Maryland in the United States. I'm an American born in the same state. So I plan to eventually graduate college and go to medical school. We'll see if that becomes reality, but that's the current trajectory of my life. In my spare time, I like making music and I also make wine sometimes. So yeah.
So you make you make wine.
Not good wine, it's shit wine. Completely like the flavor is terrible. It's only to get the alcohol. That's the only purpose of it.
Do
And
you
that's
make
only
it?
because, like in college, it might it's usually it's easy, but sometimes you're in a pinch and you can't get alcohol quickly, so it's emergency stuff.
Wait, honestly, that is actually pretty genius. That's pretty genius. Like you're actually making wine out of your out of your
No,
dormers.
you just like purchase some
Oh, okay.
fruit juice, you get some yeast, put in the yeast, put in some sugar, trap it in some equipment, and you just wait. That's about it.
Okay. Okay. Oh well, still that's pretty insane. I mean, that's up to you for that. um, do you like give it to your friends or is it just
Oh
like
yeah,
your own
yeah, yeah,
personal?
yeah. I mean, I tell them it's shit, and they agree that it tastes like shit, but it gets them drunk. That's what matters.
Maybe film in Maryland I could try, but anyway, a little bit off topic. First, I'm gonna go straight to the questions now. First question is, what was your first memory when you joined Particracy, and how was the community like back then?
Um, I remember thinking like, wow, this is kind of perfect because it's, like the running of your own little country. And I mean, as a kid, I was really into history and I played Civilization and, games like that. And this was unique though, because it came at it. Those types of games, they're all encompassing, which is great for a certain type of person. But for somebody who's really interested in party politics, parliaments, which party gets which amount of seats, what their ideology is, who's the Speaker of the House, who's the leader of the opposition, that was really one of the main things Particracy hit on, alongside giving you options for how your laws could be run. Other video games are very limited. This was basically the exclusive domain of the Particracy game, and another thing I really appreciated is that you're given actual policies like the drinking age, the retirement age, if the government intervenes in the economy, how much of the healthcare is privatized or publicized, and you don't really see that with a lot of simulators. And I think one other thing is that Particracy is a community, so it's not a lot of games. It's not really like with other people online. It's you are a singular individual and you have AI, and the only companions you have are computers. And that sort of thing is nice for a bit. But what really I think makes Particracy special is that it's inherently a community thing. It would be boring as fuck. And it is boring as fuck in one party states, or at least it used to be before the game crashed. But the most fun part, the most fun element was interacting with other parties, and it was like a real sort of legislature, debating over what laws to pass and what ratio, how to form a government, who gets which ministry, and I really appreciated that because it was quite unique, and you don't see that a lot. So I think first impressions, one, this isn't like a legislative sort of political game, unlike many others that focus more on the state and the nation and are more encompassing. This is very particularly for politics. So my first takeaway was that wow, this is actually political. And second, wow, this really does make you interact with a community of living people, with individual personalities. This isn't just me and the computer I can manipulate that doesn't really have any personality. It's a very human game, I feel like.
Have you ever tried nation states? That's another
Oh
Particracy
yeah,
game.
yeah. Actually, my friend had a nation state. Personally, I never could get into it. I think it's mostly because nation states. It's the same sort of problem you run into with the computers I just mentioned, with AI. How you're the only person, the sentient person. Because like with nation states, I feel like that's more diplomacy because you're only one person and you're given this one country, and that's it. What's you really I appreciate about Particracy is that they have a set amount of playable nations. At least they used to in the old game. Um, and you're kind of forced to choose from this pre-selected list of predeterminations with predetermined backstories. You can change them, of course, eventually with enough RP. But at the time of conception of your party, you are forced to pick an environment, and usually that environment has other players in it who are already established. So you're kind of thrust into this world that has these unique environments that have already been created and loved and interpreted by different people, and you're going to play along with that. It's like because I feel like with nation states, one thing is you can get bored quite quickly just because you're the only person in that country. And sure, foreign policy is nice, I guess, but it's just that like there's so many goddamn nation states. There's like thousands upon thousands of them that have been created. Nobody really gives a fuck. There's only like a couple of major ones that people tend to care about. So nation states, I feel like you go in, you're the only person in that country. The novelty wears off, and then you're just kind of left as a nobody. And the game kind of sucks from there. Particracy gives you a very limited cast of countries, and it already gives you a preset community and a history you have to adhere to. So it's less, so choose your own adventure and more so adapt to the environment and learn it well. But the benefit of that is that it gives you a strong community already, and there's no real risk of fading to obscurity. You can always bounce back. You can always interact with old elements of that culture and with players outside. So it's not just foreign policy, but also domestic politicking. And I think that the domestic politicking aspect of Particracy is what makes it so unique and separates it from games like nation states, where there's not really so much emphasis on your parliament or your internal politics and whatnot.
Well, now to the next question. You currently play as well. Currently, you're running two sort of nations in one larger whole. That being Baeguk. It was originally whole. Now it's split in two, from mainland and an island structure. The two different governments. Um, why? Why Baeguk? Why this structure? And do you have any major end game plans for the community?
Well,
For
I
the
don't want
country,
to.
sorry.
I don't want to spoil too much for the end game
Yeah.
because I don't think it will be shocking, but I do intend to keep my long-term plan a bit obscured until I can reveal it. It is a bit hard to do it these days, just because I'm balancing so many things. I mean, you've seen that I haven't posted on the forum for a long time. I got to get on that. But to start with the why, excuse me, to start with the why I decided to go to that country. Honestly, it's because as I was reading up on the nations that were in Particracy, um, Baeguk happened. Well, I'm an ethnic Korean. I was raised by Korean parents in America, but they were Korean nevertheless. So I have the most proficiency, I feel, with that sort of culture. I mean, because some of the other cultures in Particracy and their real world equivalents were very interesting to me, but I wasn't quite sure how to confidently and in a long term, play them out. I would have to do a lot of research and probably planning to really encompass them well, I felt like. So this was something where I kind of felt, okay, well, I already have some authority, some background knowledge on this. I would feel comfortable, trying to RP with an equivalent culture in mind. And of course, in Particracy, none of the cultures are completely 100% one for one, the same as in real life. We're all just kind of rough equivalents. And you can have an immense liberty, at least in some areas, with what you do and how you interpret it. But the plan really was just that I'm going to go in here. And actually, originally, my plan wasn't even monarchism. The first political party I made was a sort of center-right Christian Democratic Korean Presbyterian party, just because I'm not that personally. But I mean, as any Korean American can probably tell you, there are a lot of right-wing Presbyterian Korean Christians out there. In my opinion, at least for Korean Americans, they're kind of a nuisance and they're not a good thing for the community, but it's undeniable that they do exist. So my entire first party was kind of a parody of that. They were Christian Democratic, Republican, small, devoted to business interests, that sort of thing. Really, monarchism came about as just a funny little thing I would put in there. But, Vime and, okay, so the thing is, hold on. Oh, yeah, Myung. Sorry, Myung. Because I do know Myung, sort of, in real life, but I'm not going to say their personal name here for obvious
Fair enough.
reasons. But it was Vime and Myung, really, who were in the nation. And I believe Journey was also at the time, but they were less so receptive to monarchism idea. Myung, coming from a left-wing perspective, fiercely opposed it. Vime was pretty supportive. So I felt like, monarchism is kind of a cool angle. Nobody's really discussed that here yet. And so I just kind of took it and ran with it as my little political quirk. And when people began to leave the country because they were kind of done with the whole Reconstruction arc, and I was kind of given authority to take over, I really decided, you know what? Why don't we just turn it into a constitutional monarchy sort of style? I think my main inspiration was kind of the state structure of the United Kingdom, wherein, there's not really a true constitution. It's a bunch of different, like, large laws and documents that form the basis of their constitution. And they have a head of state that is, of course, the monarch of the UK. And then they have a parliament, which is where they actually, pass all the legislation. And then the queen, or excuse me, and then the king just kind of rubber stamps it. So that was definitely the primary inspiration for the Baeguk's, political system. And I decided to revive this, like, thousands-year-old dynasty from way back in the day, based on these couple of forum posts in the wiki. At the time they came in, there was barely anything really about the pre-modern, pre-colonial history. I mean, there was barely anything about colonial history either. Very shady, very, like, disconcerting. So I did my best to kind of go for all those articles and weave together a coherent narrative while taking a lot of liberties and inspiration from real life Korea. Frankly, I don't know exactly what the other players had in mind, but they put so little on the historical, side. But I felt like I had some justification in going and saying, look, we don't really have a strong national history. I need to change at least a couple of things so that there's some kind of coherent narrative. And if for whatever reasons, I imagine it'll be quite difficult now because the game is Discord only for now until the new site goes up and the old site is dead. But if some old players were to somehow come back and question the history I made, I would, of course, be amenable to changing some of that just because they were here first. But for me, truly, I do think that I did try, at least at first, my best to link the history I created with the history that was already known and extant. Like, for instance, there were three kingdoms in Baeguk, like in the first millennium. I did not change any of the names. I largely kept the maps pretty similar. So I would hope that people would see that history I created as generally pretty faithful. But I elaborated on the history so I could make, a genealogical tie from like ancient history all the way back to the present. So I could essentially say, hey, look, there's this royal family. They've been in existence for thousands of years. They did rule the country for, various intervals, and now they're coming back to rule it again. And that was the start of monarchism. And I kept monarchism pretty steady for about 300 years, I believe. So it was 300 years of monarchism, stable, largely liberal, democratic growth. Pretty similar to modern day South Korea, just with more antiquated social customs and social norms. And that was the way I played until a couple months ago when we had the communist revolution. And that, of course, gets back to your point about playing two different countries in one playable nation. And to be honest, my real true motivation for that was I was bored. Because
Yeah.
I've been no, no, literally that's the entire justification, because I was bored, because we've been doing this entire same thing for 300 years in game, and it does get boring at a certain point. Literally all you post is economy is doing well, economy is doing slow, this one religious group has a quarry, this one political group has a quarry, the monarch died, new monarch,
Oh
political
yeah.
bullshit, economic bullshit, monarch died, new monarch, rinse and repeat. And I was thinking, and I was also like looking at a bunch of North Korean stuff at the time. I was like, you know what? What if we sort of became like North Korea? But I didn't want to do a plain North Korean copy, because I know that's been, good lord, like how many times North Korea has been done in Particracy, both in and outside of the Kyo, the Kyo are like
Even in my
part.
nation, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, no, no, well, I mean, it's fine because North Korea is one of the most memeable, you know,
Yeah.
in the world, so it's understandable. But for me, I was like, well, this is basically Korea, so we could easily do that. But I also do want them to have some unique elements, and this hasn't been exactly fleshed out on the wiki or on the forum yet, so you will actually see it. But at least in my mind, some differences is that the current, Democratic People's Republic is culturally supposed to be based on this. Well, there's this kingdom called Goguryeo that used to rule what is now North Korea, some parts of Manchuria, and some parts of South Korea. They were like this huge empire. So in my mind, and you can see that in the state symbols on their flag and on their emblem, they are supposed to be kind of based on Goguryeo, and as a result, they use certain vocabulary, and their syntax of their language is structured just a bit differently to adhere more to those areas. And in the future, I am planning to reveal more of that cultural influence. So it's not just a direct link to modern day North Korea. They have a lot of elements of that ancient kingdom in their dress, in their mannerisms, and in their language. And I definitely do plan to expand on that. So I didn't want to just make it a one-of-one carbon copy, and I do believe that in the future you will see that it's largely based on North Korea, but there's definitely elements of that ancient kingdom in there. And to that end, another thing I also wanted to make sure I was doing when I decided to have the communist revolution was, put the rump government of the old monarchy, on that island, which is sort of analogous to this. There's a real life island in South Korea called Jeju Island, and it has a very unique history. It is sort of like Hawaii. The people there are like related to Koreans, but they are not. They have their own language, they have their own social customs and religion and beliefs and whatnot. So I wanted to kind of, sort of over time, it would initially begin to resemble, the mainlanders. But as time goes on, there's going to be more of that native shamanistic sort of Jeju, really influence. And another thing that's kind of interesting about the divide, I feel like, is I got to play with culture and language. So in modern day North and South Korea, the North, the Northern language is very different in some aspects from the Southern language. They're mutually intelligible, but they are both very clearly distinct. And the funny thing is actually that's kind of flipped in the current divide in Baeguk, because the mainland communists speak informally, and they actually have what would be a South Korean accent using the Korean language. The people on the island, the monarchists, the capitalists, they speak like North Koreans, and they have northern accents, and they use but they don't use the exact same language and grammar of the North. They use an even more outdated version. It's like early modern Korean, so it dates back to the Korean Empire, and like the late 1800s, early 1900s, sort of. So they speak like very old timey. The mainland speaks more like modern. They're not quite as modern as modern day like South Korea, but they're supposed to have this kind of South Korean vibe to them. And if you like look at the average people, you'll see in the capitalist state, they wear traditional clothes, traditional hair, traditional vibe. In the mainland, they dress like modern day South Koreans. So like everybody has a bowl cut, everybody has like fucking t-shirt, jeans, whatnot. So I just thought that was kind of interesting because it's not really North Korea in the cultural or fashion sense, at least. I wanted to give them an element that was kind of in between, not exactly modern day South Korea, but not exactly North Korea either.
Well, Do you personally believe, and this is the next question now, do you personally believe, out of character, that Baeguk has a special place in the Particracy world? If so, did it have that special place in the world in the Particracy world before you came in or after you came in? And if not, do you think Baeguk can have a special place in Particracy world in the future?
Well, I know you said out of character. To answer in character real quick, if I were in character, it would be, it would obviously be saying, oh, well, our glorious Democratic People's Republic is the vanguard of the world revolution, and it's leading the global proletariat and all that bullshit. Out of character, no, I do not believe really that it's ever been. I don't really believe that Big has ever been an exceptional country in particularly. I don't have the full forum saved, so obviously I can't go back and look at the old history, the old game, and miraculous detail. But I have archived and I have saved various bills and looked at it in the past. And certainly I would say Pegu, in terms of character engagement, in terms of RP, there's been a shit ton of RP. If you go back to the old form, there's like 420, at least 420 pages. So that's, of 10 posts each. So you do some quick math, that's 4,200 pages, 4,200 articles that have been written about Peguk. And so that is a massive corpus compared to other countries. I think certainly RP has been very dynamic in that country. I mean, obviously not to an extent as like Lufori. I believe Lufori is probably the most. I'm sure you'd agree with me in saying that they're probably the most active in RP.
Yeah.
So obviously nothing to. Oh yeah, yeah.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I'm kind of in Luthori right now, sort of, kind of, and wow,
Yeah. So obviously Baeguk has never had any like sort of RP to that degree, but I would argue that the internal RP has been quite robust for a Dovanian third world sort of, not exactly third world, for a Dovanian semi-obscure nation. But that doesn't translate. RP and internal politics does not translate to foreign influence and relevance. I don't believe that Baeguk has any like real tangible, like enormous sort of foreign influence. They just kind of exist. They've been like a middling sort of, yeah. I mean, like everybody can probably, I'd imagine if you were to be in character, people could probably point them out on the map. They couldn't really tell you much about them beyond the fact that, oh well, they exist. We know their flag. We know what the average person from there tends to look like. Maybe is Kyo food popular in the Terran world, like Korean barbecue is popular in our world? I don't know. Maybe it is. But definitely, I would say they don't have that tangible of a worldwide evidence, tangible of a worldwide presence. And I would argue personally that they don't really need that. My idea for them was never really to, oh, let's turn country X into a superpower. I feel like that's a nice, obviously it's a fictional game, but even then, you do have to kind of have these realistic expectations for what you could, reasonably do with a country given its size, its population, its demographics, its development, and its location. Baeguk, if you look at a map, it's basically where like sort of Finland, northern Sweden, northern like Norway arguably are in the real life. For like RP's sake, we had some bullshit going that there's warm water currents on the west coast, which actually makes it a lot warmer than those equivalent nations would be in our timeline, in our world. So Baeguk certainly is like ridiculously, but like in my opinion, you kind of have to have it ridiculously warm to make it work. So Baeguk's climate is more like real world North Korea than, or like Vladivostok than it should be. It should, like, if we were being completely realistic here, we kind of bullshitted in the warm water currents just for players' convenience, because if we were being realistic, it would be cold as fuck. Like the northern regions would be like Iceland or Siberia or something. But because of that like little RP grace, we do have it as more of a temperate climate relatively. That being said, again, when I came, I feel like Peguk was not a backwater, but it was not particularly internationally relevant. I'd like to think that due to my economic RP and my reaching out with various, like world leaders and stuff, it was made into a respectable, if not like, hugely important member of the liberal democratic international community. Now with the division, I am trying to sort of make like the communist government into like, this sort of like modern day North Korea. You don't think of Cold War North Korea. You don't really think of North Korea as, being that relevant of a country these days in terms of like actual diplomatic influence. But in like the 60s and 70s, North Korea was funding all sorts of like African and Asian and Latin American liberation movements and like these communist guerrilla groups. So in the future, if I get back to posting, I would kind of like to see the modern day Malian government as, maybe even a state sponsor of terrorism or something, where like they are not hugely relevant in economic, cultural, or social terms, but they are somewhat relevant in terms of the communist world and of funding these far left, socialist groups. So the way I see it, that's the current niche for the way the mainland government's going to be. The island government, I feel like, is once it liberalizes, it's going to kind of become sort of like a mini South Korea. Not nearly, of course, as successful or as influential as are like this world's South Korea, but definitely they're going to rely a lot on cultural exports. So I'm thinking like oh come because it's sort of like almost a tropical island. So I'm thinking like come to our island, go to the resort, go to a beach, get yourself a cocktail, have a good time. And then, of course, they might be like, because my original thing was even as when we were mainly government, it was like, let's have them selling a lot of skincare and a lot of beauty products. And let's have them also trying to cater to men. Because, if you get men on the beauty craze, then you expand your market like almost twice over. So definitely, I think they will be trying to push this sort of beauty concept, like investing in traditional medicine and soothing stuff. And we'll have to see if other countries actually take the bait. But in my mind, Baeguk is never really supposed to be a great power. That's not really because I feel like some nations in Particracy they're kind of destined, or at least they're presupposed to be either a great power or to have the capability of developing into one. In my opinion, the best Baeguk should be is some sort of like Nordic nation where it's really well developed, people are generally pretty happy, economy's good, but you're not going to see them like sending troops halfway around the world or like building giant ass aircraft carriers. But it's not the type of nation that the geography, the population, the culture could reasonably sustain. At best, you're going to have this middle power that's culturally, it can export and it can like have a good development relative to its size, but it's never going to have this, like dynamic sort of, grip on world affairs. And I don't think that's needed for it. I just think we're called to be the sort of geopolitical middleman where you remember they exist. You're like, oh yeah, they exist, but they're not, the godfather that's pulling all these strings. They just kind of, they are there, they're a tangible presence, but they are not going to be, as big as Lufori or even Yingdala or, Anato or something.
Well, you've made a lot of designs over the years, especially about Baeguk. Were you inspired by the people in our community in your designs? And have any designs posed challenges for you that you were unable to finish?
Oh, so sorry. What was the last?
Um,
Well,
so, have any designs posed challenges for you, and do you have any designs that you're unable to finish as a result?
are we talking about creative stuff?
Yeah, yeah, in Park C, that you made like several designs over the last year or so in Baeguk. Um, were you inspired by the people in our community in making those designs, and have any designs posed challenges for you, and do you have any designs that you're unable to finish?
I think Imperial Pearl definitely. I'm an Imperial Pearl stan personally. I just think he's. Well, Imp is heraldry work. Excuse me, I can't say a word. Heraldry work has really been inspirational. I think. Certainly, he does it better than me. I'm not too familiar with the Western heraldic concepts, but he was actually the one that really inspired me to say, okay, well, we don't really have a culture that's meant, at least like historically, Koreans did not have any sort of equivalent in their culture. But in Particracy, Peguk and the Kyo people were colonized for centuries by Gallians, who are, obviously a stand for Spanish people. And Spanish, they had a beautiful coats of arms. I mean, I'm not justifying what their empire did or the atrocities, but they did, I feel like at least. Spanish heraldry is very developed and rich tradition. So I tried basing my initial designs off of Spanish heraldry. And as it went along, I kind of, developed SVGs and I kind of made these little visual things that were more in tune with traditional Korean culture. So there were some like westernized Korean elements that were incorporated into my designs, but largely it came from the Western school. And one thing that's happening now is with the communist revolution, you're seeing the collapse of a lot of heraldry and its replacement in the future, I haven't really published too much, but in the future, we'll be replacing it with more indigenous Korean designs, especially those based on the kingdom I mentioned earlier. That the mainland is largely based off of Goguryeo. Uh, there's a ton of really rich, um, well, it's called Pyeokha in Korean. It means like sort of like tomb paintings. So there's a lot of like tomb murals. Like the tomb of like King Tutankhamun and like all the pharaohs in Egypt. Well, it's nothing that elaborate, but it's a similar concept that exists in North Korea, where they would have these rich nobles buried in these stone tombs, and they would paint all over it. It's like beautiful depictions of dancers and warriors and artists and craftsmen and merchants, and it's like these scenes from daily life that they would paint onto the walls. So I looked at a lot of those designs, and now we're trying to bring those into the incorporation of like different state emblems, regional emblems, and flags and whatnot. So stay tuned. I am hopefully going to get those out by the end of the year. We'll have to see. But it used to be sort of Western inspired, oh, let's do this more monarchy, more Western stuff. That is still going on to some extent in the island rump government. But I think for my designs, they are now beginning to shift to a sort of indigenous, more like Korea centric model. And I would definitely say other players have inspired me in terms of the Western heraldry. So I definitely do thank them. I think that the community has a lot of great ideas, and really, because we get to bounce ideas off of each other. Say, I have 4 designs. Do you like design A, B, C, or D best? And then other players can chime in and give a rationale and say, oh, this design is good, but you might want to, I don't know, like, make the fish bigger, or you might want to emblazon it differently, or some variation on that. So I think community feedback has been both immensely gratifying when you see that people actually like the stuff you make, but more importantly, they know when to be critical and when to tell you, oh, well, I think it might be better if you do X or this, and that, in my opinion, really allows you to improve.
Well, in the time that you spend in this community, about almost 2 years or so, um, what do you think has changed as you've become accustomed to the customs and to the people and culture of Particracy? And do you think, in your personal opinion, our community is going in a good direction or a bad direction?
Well, let's tackle these one at a time. When you're talking about changes I see, I think in terms of at least a post, one thing I see the most is the use of generative AI being used. And I know we agreed that we should not use AI on written posts on the text, and that although there are some people who tried to do that, they've since been banned and apprehended. But I'm talking more about like images, and I'm guilty of this too. I use generative AI to create leader portraits, and political figure portraits, just because I used to use real people, but it is kind of, I feel like it is kind of icky and maybe ethically questionable if you want to, use. I mean, because one of the great one of the great fun things about old PT was that you could use real life, mostly same people, and then use them to create these wacky OCs. And it would just be kind of funny. So I appreciate that. But at the same time, now that we do really have the ability at our fingertips to generate completely realistic looking people, but that aren't, these real world figures, it is, in my opinion, more ethically sound. And of course, you can debate the efficacy of using, not efficacy. You can debate the ethicality of using these models that are trained on real life professionals and artists without their consent. I think that is a conversation that does need to be had, which is why personally I'm not a huge fan of using AI that much. But I will admit I am guilty of using uh, that sort of AI thing to generate how I would imagine these people to look in real life. And I am an artist. Well, I'm not an artist, but I do doodle in my free time, and I actually have drawn some of those people in my sort of art style. And the reason why I don't publish it or I don't put it on the forums is that, or the wikis, because I think it would kind of be breaking the fourth wall, and it wouldn't be consistent. So if people do give me the okay and they say, oh yeah, it's fine to use your doodles, then I will use the doodles instead of generative AI. But for now, the doodles are just kind of in the backlog. But turning back to our community, not just me personally, I do think that one thing I have noticed is that sort of comfort, that familiarity with these new, AI people, that you can really make doing whatever you want, and you don't need to worry about, having people associate them with these weird, like real life people. Like for instance, in Hallstria and Gao Soto, the Elia cult, where like that weird guy just slapped Trump's face onto everything. That was really weird and, in
Yeah.
my opinion, uncomfortable. We don't really have that situation anymore, thank God. I think most people now are just kind of creating these unique, or at least generic looking people who cannot be traced back to any real world figure. And especially, I think, and I'm not saying it's a bad or a good thing, but I noticed that even like Imp, uh, excuse me for getting this on, Krieg, I don't know how to say his name like properly, but well, his, Discord name, anyways. And Luis, I think all of them have kind of used this as an opportunity to also begin to really flesh out their characters' personalities. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I do notice that maybe in the days before AI, we were focusing less on personalities, individuals that we had made up. Now I feel like because we can give them a face and we can have do whatever we want, and there's no worry about, oh, well, can I find this picture of, I don't know, like Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or Shinzo Abe doing something, and then I can make an article about it. Instead, you can just make the article beforehand, have the idea, and then type into a random image generator. Okay, draw my OC, I don't know, like barfing on a prime minister at a banquet or something like that, where they can mold the images to the situation. Because I remember before, at least, when we all start to use AI, we would always have to dig around for real life pictures of things happening. And that made it a bit difficult. For instance, I had a lot of like diplomatic events where it would be pandavanism. So our people, like people in Baeguk, would reach out to diplomats and foreign officers in countries that were largely based off of sub-Saharan Africa. So often it was like Swahili people, or Igbo people, or Hausa, or it was some people like that. The problem is there aren't a lot of IRL pictures of either South or North Korean diplomats reaching out with their Nigerian or their Tanzanian or their Ugandan or Kenyan counterparts. So it was quite difficult to really get an accurate picture of that going on. And so you would have to kind of mold your articles almost, or at least alter them to fit what had happened in real life. And AI completely removes that. And I think that is a blessing because it now means that, you can use images for anything. But I do say that that is a tangible shift I've seen where now people are kind of no longer bound by real world geopolitical reality or, the stress of having to, find pictures for this individual. So they can really do whatever they want now. And I feel that's liberating, but it has resulted in a decisive and noticeable shift in how we write our stories and how we especially approach personalities and putting words into the mouths of these, well, for lack of a better term, OCs, original characters. And in regards to the second question, if the community is going to a right or a bad place, I think you have to define, what good or bad is, because this is a new game we're playing now. This is not the same game, and I think it depends on if you see change as a good or as a bad thing, because we are definitely substantially breaking with tradition. And again, we are also in a transitionary period. We do not have the new game up yet. Greek is still working on it, bless his soul. And of course, we shouldn't pester him because he is really, I mean, everybody has their own fucking life to deal with as well. And I think this is stuff that he has done has been immense. This man is, well, not single handedly, but I would argue more than anybody else in recent memory. He has been, an amazing boon for the community and for its ability to sustain itself. We would not be where we are right now without his efforts. But I do think there's a tragic sort of element to the old game ending because I mean, of course, we all had. I'd like to imagine an attachment to, the logging in the actual website. Typing in classic.particracy.net into the browser and going to the login page, and typing in your username and your password, and then going to your country and passing bills and writing legislation and seeing your messages. It was, it's very nostalgic to me. The old site. If you go back further enough, like the early 2010s, of course, I wasn't in the community at the time, but when I look at the old forum, or at least when I used to look at the old forum, it was taken down. I think old Particracy was definitely less polished. In my opinion, this is kind of the perfect encapsulation. Our community is kind of the perfect encapsulation of like how the internet has almost become sanitized. Because, and I'm not saying that old Particracy is better because there's a ton of like unregulated shit. And I'm sure you have a much better first-hand experience with that than I do. But what I'm trying to get at too is that nowadays everything is very polished. I feel like we definitely have these set ideas for what this country should be, what its national spirit is like, who's in that country. We like having modern data and economic reports in a specific sort of newspaper format and these graphic designs. And it's all very well done, very well polished. You can tell people take their time on these. and it's a lot more personalistic. Now instead of multiple people being in one country, at least until the new game comes up, it's going to be you have one person from one country and they control that. But I do want to say that I do think there's a tragic loss in how the Wild West days of Particracy are over. It used, and you can argue this is actually a negative quality, but it just amazes me that back in the day, at least from what I've seen, it used to be cultures are very mendable. You could have batshit insane stuff happening. And like the Nazi Party comes out of nowhere, it wins elections. The Communist Party comes out of nowhere, it wins all the elections, and it becomes a ruling force with no buildup whatsoever, no justification. And you have these cultural shifts. Like, this culture is ancient Egyptian, poof, now it's Indian, poof, now it's Native American, poof, now it's Mayan. There was this much more mobility and flexibility, I feel like, in cultures and the ability to kind of get them really to be whatever you wanted. And I understand that's harmful to continuity and to really having this polished thing. But the way I see it, well, Particracy, you had the best of both worlds. There was immense potential for people to, embed these worlds and to be really thorough and unique. But there was also the immense potential, obviously, to kind of do batshit insane things, completely throw people's RP out the window. I know especially that I mean I wasn't there personally, but I did hear from older players that there was also cultural insensitivity problems and racism problems, even sexism, maybe even homophobia. I'm not too.
Toxicity too.
Wait, what?
Toxicity too. Like a lot of people not being respectful of each other.
Oh my god, yeah, especially because like the early internet. So of course there was, and I'm not going to deny that because, as I said, you also had more freedom, creative freedom. You also had more bullshit and terrible things like that. So I am glad now that it seems to be a more tight knit community. And I would argue at least a far more respectful one. I don't really see people being assholes the way that I saw. I read a lot of messages on that old site. And I'm not saying that people back then they weren't respectful as well. I'm just saying I feel like now it is a lot less socially acceptable or permissible to be that uh, belligerent. So I would say in those regards, we are definitely going in a good direction as a community. But remember that, for instance, Tegulogesa and North Davani used to be separate countries when they merged. So again, you don't really have the ability to create new countries these days as you used to do in the old game. In the old game, you could just will into existence. The new game, it's a lot more institutionalized. So I think we are moving in a direction where we've abandoned the woes and perils of unrestricted creativity in favor of having a very institutionalized and stable system where we know each other and basically we are committed to mostly upholding the status quo. And I might get some shit for that because I know we are making some changes. I can pull up specific examples, but I mean, I'd imagine some players would take offense to my assertion of that because they say, "Hey, we're not, we're not fossils, we're not dinosaurs, we're not, you know, we just want rules and we want consistency." And I completely understand that. But I do, looking back at a time where I wasn't even in the game, I do kind of wonder how would I feel? Would I have been happier if I had known the game was existed at that time? And I mean, well, I'm 18, so I would have been like in middle school or some shit. But would I have, if I were this age, where I have been more happy in a more carefree environment like it was in the old days, where you could kind of like make rapid changes and not really have that much consistency. But it was more about it's like having fun and building your own narrative. And now I feel like we as a community have decided consistency is very important. Being realistic is very important. And so we've given up those more like radical elements in return for having a more close-knit community that really respects, what you've done with other people's RP and that builds on it substantially in a way that makes sense. And I think that does promote more inter-community respect and diligence. So I do think we are moving to a state that will ultimately create more allegiance and more longevity for the community. Because I mean, you'll remember that, like for instance, I believe that Greek has been playing since the dawn of the game, or at least since very early into its age. Um, Mr. Stodden has been playing for a very long time. I believe Alaskan Crab Puffs too. A whole lot of people that I'm not mentioning here have been playing for far longer than I am. But you will see that also if you look at the vast majority of people who played the old game, they're gone now. They've left. And I think one thing might be that because the old structure of PT was kind of like you can just go in, create your old thing, and then when people get pissed at you, you just leave. And now that we have a community centered around longevity and consistency, I do feel like that promotes an idea where we will have less new players, but the players that do stay will have a far longer retention rate.
All right. Well, I I joined in 20, May of around May of 2022, so I did not experience the toxicity and I did not experience much of the weirdness that was OPT. Um, I joined in Gujarati with Myung, with Marska, with um, Jeb Jab, with a couple other people, and uh, as I'm sure you've probably seen, all of us, you could feel like eight people in one nation, and you could just simulate actual real democracy in that nation. Um, so we have fun there. I'm I have this I'm saying this tangent because we're kind of sort of the new guards of PT. Not saying the old guard's bad or anything like that, but we're kind of a new generation of PT players
Oh
where
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we're we're
Well, wait, sorry. Continue. You were a new generation where.
where you can't like fit eight people in one nation. You only have I don't even know how many people you can realistically where you can actually fit in a new PT nation, but there isn't that easy entry. There isn't that uh, camaraderie of working together to build a nation. It's all like nowadays it's just one or two people at most building up one nation, building up this lore, building up everything in that nation, which kind of feels sad in a way, to be honest. So
Yeah, I remember when I first came to the game, it was in Baeguk, and well, I guess it used to be called Tamguk, and there was a ton of people who were, it was a group effort to kind of get it out of the war and to rebuild the country. And I did feel lonelier after everybody went away, and I was the only guy left. It was, yeah,
yeah, similar experience to Contrati. Everyone started to fall off, and then there were brief spots of people coming back and then leaving again. But like you've defined Baeguk over the last few years. I've defined Contrati over the last few years. It just I suppose this new Particracy is meant for that nowadays. That you can just go into a nation, sort of redefine it, and not be bothered by someone coming in and possibly changing everything and screwing everything over, good or bad.
yeah.
Uh, but now to wean off of Park C for a bit, let's just talk about you. And first off, have you made any graphic designs that were not related to Park C? And if
Wait,
so,
so
can
how many what?
have you made any graphic designs that were not related to Park C? Like,
Um,
um,
yeah, honestly, I do enjoy vexillology a bit, so I have sometimes created different flags. But I will say that Particracy accounts for at least 90% of the stuff I've made.
fair enough. Just mythology, or have you made like logo? Have you made like buildings or designs of buildings or designs of cities or what have you?
Oh, well, I mean, if we're talking about designs, I was thinking more in terms of seals and I guess we would call them in the West like Chinese calligraphy chops and whatnot. I also do calligraphy sometimes, so it was more in that format.
Fair enough. Now to the next question. Um, what's your future like? What what are you studying, and how did you decide to go in that particular route for your future?
Um, so it's actually been interesting. So originally I was meant to do international affairs. That was my major in undergraduate, international affairs. And as you can tell, I'm no longer doing that, and it's because I went to all these conferences and I met all these networked people, and I networked basically all my freshman year. And one thing that profoundly struck me was this, I became depressed. Like in the sense that it did not give me any sort of fulfillment. There was no enjoyment. It's when you do international affairs, especially where I was doing it in Washington D.C., it's all just bullshitting. It's all just like acting respectable, like, oh yeah, my name is blah 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 from this institution. And people will always lie and say, like, because not the majority, but a lot of networking happens at like intellectual conferences and foreign policy conferences. And people can lie until they're blue that, oh, I'm here for, to hear so and so academic speak. But everybody knows they're just here to like fucking make social connections. And they're not legitimate. It's all just smiling through your teeth and like doing handshakes until your fucking arm falls off, and it's completely disingenuous. You're not making a difference in the world. You're not helping anybody. It's bullshit in my opinion. It's all just bullshit. Some people are fine with bullshit, but I couldn't do it, so I decided, you know what, I need something. I was unhappy in my life, and then my friend, he had a heart issue. He had to go to the hospital, and well, like seeing him go to the hospital, it really just made me have an epiphany, and I decided to get to research and get into healthcare. And the more I read about it, the more interested I became, excuse me. So I decided to do pre med, and I did summer courses, and that really reaffirmed me in the sense that I like where this is going. I don't want to toot my horn, but I will say I do consider myself pretty proficient at biology, uh, pretty proficient at chemistry, not so much physics, but we're getting there. So, and I did do it a lot in high school, although that was my main thing. So now it's kind of pre med, and hopefully, if I graduate with a good track, I can apply and hopefully get in somewhere into medical school, or at least like do volunteer work and shit before going to medical school. And so when I go do that, we'll see where that goes. But for now, the trajectory is probably doctor. Maybe I'll go to nursing school instead and become a nurse or a physical therapist of some sort. But for now, it is doctor.
Is your friend doing okay these days? It's hard.
Oh, so he's doing better, but he does have to refrain from doing certain substances. So we're keeping an eye on him, and he is doing better. Thank you for asking.
That's good. Um, Now you're Korean American, right?
Correct.
And you don't necessarily have to answer this question, but right now, I'm going to preface this by saying that right now, the peninsula is divided: North Korea, South Korea, and families in Korea can be divided between one side of the border and the other. I would like to ask you, and again, you don't have to answer this. Um, do you have family on the other side of the border? Has your family managed to make contact with them? And so,
Oh wait, sorry. You said do I have family
do
members
you
that
have
are what?
do you have family that's on the other side of the border? So, do you have family in North
Oh, in North
Korea?
Korea. Oh, so the thing is, we know that we have family there. We have not been able to track them since the war. So I certainly don't know any North Koreans. They're all dead. Well, okay, I should be dismissing the people we knew before the war were either all dead, are either all dead now, or they're incredibly elderly. Either way, there's no way to contact them. So we have knowledge of some cousins that do exist, and they had kids. We don't know if those kids had kids or if they survived the famine of the 90s. So it could be very well that our direct relatives in the north are now all extinct. We just simply don't know. There's no way to verify it. Either way, I've never met northern people, so I don't really have as much of an attachment to them. My whole opinion is that, I mean, first of all, I'm not even a Korean, at least not considered a Korean by most, not maybe most, but like by a pretty substantial part of the Korean population. We're what's called 한국계 미국인, which means like American person of Korean descent. So for me, there's not so much a sentimental attachment. And I'm sure even if you interview young South Koreans, I don't want to speak for an entire country, but from what I've seen, a lot of people are not so much concerned with reunification as they are with making sure that they have a stable job and finding employment and getting rent, being able to pay the bills. So reunification simply isn't that big of a topic when you have to contend with real, tangible sources of negativity in your life. But to my knowledge, we do have family there. At least we used to have. Whether they have surviving descendants, my age, we do not know. There's no way to contact them. There has not been contact since the 50s.
Now you've been back. You've been to Korea, South Korea, I assume. And
Yes.
um, how's it like? How's it? How's Korea today? South Korea today? How's it compared to stateside? And in terms of life experience and stuff, do you think living in Korea would be better, or would it be better to live stateside?
So I'd like to preface my like this probably mostly shows that I'm kind of a stupid, dumb autist. But generally, whenever I go to Korea, sometimes I'll look at something and be like, oh, I should make that a thing in Particracy. So like, I'll get inspiration for something stupid. The old Imperial Palace, for instance, the residence of the Emperor Baeguk, is actually that was based on a place I visited when I was in Korea. But in terms of non-Particracy things, I will say there are some things I really value in Korea but are not present in the United States. Now, lately I'd say the cleanliness. Uh, I had to go to Baltimore often, and if you've been to Baltimore, you know that it's a nice city in some areas, but trash is not exactly on the minds of most people, so there's a lot of littering. Korea tends to buck those trends. I don't see nearly as much trash. Everybody's very orderly. Another major thing is the public transport. Korean buses, Korean trains, glorious. They're usually on time. Very extensive routes, service almost the entire city of Seoul, which is where I stay usually. Uh, so it's great public transport, but convenience stores too. You can get about just anything in a convenience store, more so than in a Walgreens or in a, you know, or a CVS in the United States. I think they're more convenient. They're more wide reaching. Also, the food's really good and it's quite cheap compared to the United States, especially because like Korean food itself in the United States is so expensive simply because they have to cater to Koreans and has to be authentic. So they spend a lot of money on these imported ingredients and whatnot. But Korean food is of course just regular food in Korea, so that is extremely cheap there, and it's very nice to eat that sort of food, which is kind of rare in America. That being, and I think people are generally more polite in Korea, so they're a lot nicer. Customer service, a lot nicer when you just interact with people in a commercial setting. That being said, I another thing is also that I mean I do find Koreans personally a lot more attractive than like the average population you see in America. I think one reason is because people generally tend to be a bit healthier in their diet and in their exercise in Korea. There's a lot more people walking around, less sedentary lifestyles. So people are in general slimmer and less obese, which is what I like to see in people. Um, that being said, in general, I do think that Korean men they tend to I won't say dress better in the sense that this isn't their choice, but society as a whole, Korean society is very lookist, and I think that's a bad thing. But it does mean that people are tend to like trends, and they tend to be dressed very similarly, but in ways that are generally pleasing to the eye. So the fashion tends to be more pleasing to the eye, but not necessarily better. Because the good thing about America is that, yeah, there's no real set trends, but everybody can be unique. There's no shame generally in America in being unique and being yourself and expressing yourself. That's something I truly appreciate about American society. And that's something I don't really appreciate about the US until I go to Korea. Because everybody looks the same in Korea. And I'm not saying that in the racist way that literally, like, not, of course, not literally everybody looks the same. But what I mean is that almost identical haircut for everybody, almost identical shirts and shoes and pants and cultural trends. You simply do not see that same amount of conformity of the United States, even among racial and ethnic groups. So even though you took all the white guys in this place, all the black guys in this place, all the Hispanic guys and Native American guys and Asian guys, you're still going to find, pretty good variation between the groups. Of course, there are trends, and we talk about performative males in our culture, and all these tropes and countercultures. But that is America. You'll see a lot of variation in individuals being themselves. You cannot do that in Korea. In Korea is far more of a conservative society that places emphasis on conformity and worship authority. Oh, but they love to worship authority in Korea. This, if you're in higher position or if you're older than somebody, you basically make other people your bitches. It's very misogynist too. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all those crazy incel stories, all those
Yeah.
crazy woman hating stories from Korea. I mean, of course, we have misandry there too. In general, I think the gender situation is very regrettable there. And of course, I'm not trying to say this as a blanket statement because individually, I know many Korean men that are great, very kind, respectful to women. But unfortunately, as a society and as a culture, you see the broader trends and you realize, okay, this is really fucked up, especially for women. Women are dealt a very poor hand. And of course, Vera talks that, well, women don't have to go to national service because, the military is required for all Korean males. And that is true. That is another thing. That is another reason why I would not wish to be in Korea, even if I were a US citizen. Because I actually know some people, well, my friend knows some people where they're American citizens, because they used to have Korean citizenship, they're forced to go to the military, even though they're American.
Right.
So I will say that in that regard, it's quite unfortunate and regrettable in some areas. So really, I do think that I would much prefer to be an American. The way I see it is, Korea is a wonderful place to visit, but you do not want to live there. And I say that especially somebody who smokes weed, who does drugs, who is also an open homosexual, because it's might not be outright illegal, but it is incredibly taboo to be an open homosexual in South Korea. You can easily be assaulted, lose your health, and maybe not your healthcare, but lose your job, lose your social standing, be ostracized, and there's basically nothing you can do about it. It's very much a society that forces you to shut in and shut out and be like everybody else. And I mean, of course, now with MAGA and the second Trump administration, we are seeing American tolerance begin to curb and very to be, of course, more than anything, vicious transphobic attacks. But, homophobia is increasingly coming more into prominence in our culture. So I'm not saying that the United States is some beautiful, utopia where gay people are allowed to be free. God knows how much discrimination gay people face here. And in addition to that gay, there's also racist elements because the American gay community is extremely, extremely white oriented, white dominated by these like white twinks. If you especially for black, brown, yellow men, it's very hard in gay communities because it's just completely white dominant. I mean, I don't want to say blanket stuff again, but from what I've experienced, there's very much a curb towards these white idealized beauty standards that cater to the white population, leave everybody else in the dark. Some of the most racist people I met, very racist, especially against black people, also Asians, also brown people, have been white gays. But the reason I make this argument is because as fucked and as problematic as the American gay community is, it is still very nice that you're free to be a gay person in America. Korea, it's changing now, hopefully, but it's just kind of a shit show. The entire country of Korea is kind of like the Bible Belt of the United States. You're familiar with that, the stubborn, like ultra religious places, because in Korea, there's only really about like 25% of the population that is Protestant Christian, but they're like the most vile, culty, extreme, like homophobic Christians there are. And there's no real major social group that really stands up or cares to stand up for LGBT Koreans. For instance, like the six major religions, I believe it's Catholicism, Protestantism, Buddhism, other sect of Buddhism, Chintoism, um, and there's another religion. But all those six religious leaders in Korea came out to make a joint statement saying that they did not encourage necessarily anti-gay like discrimination, but also they said that gay people should not be equated with quote unquote normal straight people. So it's a society that normalizes homophobia and oppression. Not even to mention all the gross misogyny and oppression of marginalized groups and conformity. So I am very glad that America, for all its faults, at least does allow me to be who I am, unabashedly, proudly. And that's one thing I really appreciate about America, and that I could not live in Korea for. I will say,
Well,
though, as a final comment, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
you're good. You're good.
I,
You can go
I,
for as
as,
long as you want, honestly. You're good.
okay, just like in general, as a final point, if you fit all the requirements, if you are either like ethnically Korean passing, or if you look white and you are a straight rich person, or at least you're a straight person that looks good, but doesn't have a disability, or some malfiguration, but you're attractive, you will have a great time in Korea. I think you can live in Korea, and you can, because you don't press up against any of the oppressive institutional norms. But so long as you are in the good graces of the institutions, you can have an amazing life in Korea. Cloud transport's good. Workaholism is a bit of a problem, but as a foreigner, you should be like pretty much exempt from that. But if you are non-Korean, they're quite racist towards Black people and towards brown people as well. If you are, not up to the idealized beauty standard, because God knows how much lyricism is there. If you talk different or dress different, or you violate any of the social conditions, then you will not have a good time living there. You might be okay just as a tourist, but God forbid you try to make a living in Korea. You will not have fun. If you think that the U.S. is hyper competitive or judgmental by looks, I'm not denying that it is, but compared to Korea, it's better. So I'm glad to be an American in that regard.
Do you? I got another question. It's sort of related to the experience and Particracy. It's essentially does
Yeah.
your does your life experience or being in Korea and being in America impact your playing Particracy in any way?
Well, one thing I do think is that sometimes I contemplate going to Baltusia, but I don't think I could really sustain a long RP arc, so I haven't gone yet. So I can't really say in regards to living in America. Living in America, I don't think has really informed Particracy that much, in my opinion. Living in Korea, on the other hand, gave me sort of a basis for like how I envisioned how Baeguk would look. Baeguk is not supposed to be one-on-one with Korea, obviously. Before the communist revolution, it was kind of envisioned as a very antiquated, like almost what would happen if Japan had never colonized Korea and it continued to be very culturally conservative. So, um, for instance, I imagine that if you were to walk the street of Baeguk before the communist revolution, you'd see basically everybody wearing the traditional Korean clothing in a manner roughly equivalent to how you see, modern Western businessmen always wearing business suits or blazers and button-ups and something like that. So in the same way, the Pegukese people would wear traditional clothing in a way that most Southern Koreans do not. It's very rare to see a man wearing traditional clothing in South Korea today, if it's not a holiday. But I would like to envision that it would be sort of like daily wear for those Pegukese people. In terms of like transportation and modern amenities, again, I kind of saw a lot of South Korea. The South Korea I lived in, uh, I saw a lot of it in how I envisioned Pegu and how the aesthetics and how the art and how the architecture would operate was based largely off of South Korea, the South Korea I witnessed. And the language and the social norms and customs, again, were very much derived from South Korea. So I think South Korea was a huge inspiration and where I wanted to take Pegu at the more personal, like this cultural level.
All right. Well, the format of this podcast at 15 is I get to ask you 10 questions. I've already done that, and we've been here for an hour now, which is pretty good. But um, in return, you get to ask me up to 5 questions on any topic. So I'll pass the floor on to you. It has to be up to 5 questions on anything.
Oh, I get to ask you 5 questions.
Yes, well, up to 5 questions.
Oh shit, okay. I was not prepared for this. I'm trying to think. Okay, well, sometimes I do doodle like little things from Particracy, like I make little drawings of like the people who are supposed to be in Particracy or of what people are supposed to look like, just as a way to design things. So I guess my question to you would be: have you ever like similarly drawn or doodled for Particracy?
No. Um, my drawings. I don't draw much, and I honestly love to draw. I love to draw. Like I've seen a lot of artists. I'm friends with a lot of artists. I've been friends with a lot of artists, and I don't draw. I wish I can. I see their drawings. I see their art, and I feel a little bit jealous. Um, but I can't draw. So to your question, no. Um, and honestly, even if I could draw, I don't know if I can draw like a persona of Parksy characters, people in Parksy. I don't know if I can.
Okay, so mind if I move on to the next question?
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
What's your favorite design you've made over the years for Particracy?
Design. Hmm. Hmm. I don't think I designed much. To the credit of Journey, I mean, honestly, people like Journey, people like back in the day, Day, people like Journey, people like honestly, those two have really helped in Condrati. When they were there, they were amazing when it came to designing stuff for Condrati. But my designs were comparatively very, very, very simple. The logo of my former party, Condrati Democracy, was literally a circle and three uh, horizontal lines on a blue
Okay.
background. That's how my
I mean,
profile
I mean,
picture.
sometimes less is more.
I know. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, look, my profile picture is very simple. I'm actually I kind of like simple, very, very simple drawings, honestly. I don't know why, but it just works for me.
No, no, that's completely fine.
You're good, you're good,
Uh,
you're good.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. Am I question number three now?
Sure.
Why does the Oh man, am I? Should I keep it centered on Particracy, or am I allowed
It's
to
up
ask you
to
like,
you. Listen, any topic, it's up to you, honestly.
okay, oh, what are you studying right now?
Um, oh boy. I'm not studying anything. Honestly, right now, I'm just trying to find a job. And,
Oh, okay.
I mean, I wish I could. I really wish I could be paid in doing my current recordings. I'm going to protest and covering them. Not for myself. No, not for myself. Not for anyone else. What the fuck? I'm not getting paid for that. But I wish I could pay, getting paid for that. I don't really have a job right now, so um, that's my focus. To essentially find a job and probably get some training. I'm currently working with a group for pure related IT tech support training, but
Oh,
it's I got strange letters saying that they may be terminating that association soon. So I don't
oh,
know what's going to happen there.
that's fat. That's fucked.
Yeah. Um. Honestly, I I suppose my dream. I don't really have a dream job, but I do like helping people out when it comes to public transportation, where to go. I am really a big fan of public transportation, as you probably know, especially with metros and everything. But I do like helping people out in terms of getting them to where they need to go, giving them
Oh yeah.
directions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did apply for a janitor position once in the subway system, but I have not heard back.
Oh my god, no, the job market is terrible right now. Anyway,
Yes,
horrible.
yes, and dude, I sent like so many job applications, and I've only heard back. Like I've only got one job interview, and that job interview was like they never came. They never told me if I did well or not. They never told me like if I
Not so
got a
much
job.
about yeah, but if they even send you emails, usually it's like, unfortunately, we were not able to,
They never sent out. They didn't even
That's
bother.
so hard.
Like I was wearing a suit and everything. I was I was actually like given two job interviews for the same company. Uh, I was told I did well in the first one. Met up with one guy for a virtual interview for the second one. We're a suit and everything. Never back.
Jeez, that is harsh. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's fine. I it's fine. It probably wouldn't have worked out anyways. Honestly.
Well, okay, I was going also have you done your face reveal in the PT server yet?
Well, mm,
And not pressuring you to do it. I'm just curious if you
no,
have. 'Cause
I have done a general face reveal because I've shown up. I've shown up in two of my most recent videos. One about Summer Madani's Scavenger Hunt, one about bus race. I've shown my face, and
Oh,
in
okay.
the and in the intros to my podcast, I'm there. So my first interview episode was with Greek Idiot Slicer, and
Yeah.
I showed it off to the Discord. So I suppose that count. I suppose if that counts, then yes, I have.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel like yeah.
And I'll probably share it this episode with the posts in the Particracy community if it once it's all finished and everything.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's cool. Um, man, I forget who else has done face reveals. Let's see. Brizza, fine.
Right?
I think she did hers, right?
Yeah. Who, Wayne? Or
Sorry, Weem.
I think she did, but like I think she hit her face and yeah, I think she did. I think you have too. Like I think
Yeah.
I've seen a face of yours.
Did
Yeah.
you expect me to look the way I did? Just
Yeah.
curious to see if I have the vibes. I don't know.
Meh. Uh, yeah. like I'm not seeing faces in the Percy community that much, so
Oh
I
yeah, that's
don't. I didn't really have any expectation.
no, that's fine. All right, let's see. Next question. What made you choose Kundradi? Is there any like
uh,
particular?
Honestly, because everyone else. Well, not everyone else. Really. As I said earlier, I joined Kundrati with like Blame and Myung and Jab Jab and Starfruit and like I think Myung asked me if I wanted to try Particracy. I think it was Myung, but that's how I got into Kundrati. We went as a group, and then
Oh,
everyone started to drop out. Everyone started to go a little inactive and everything. And I just stood there and just developed it. Worked on
oh,
it.
now.
Yeah, it's strange, you know. It's a strange world, but it's a pretty cool world, isn't it?
Oh no, I completely agree. It's cool. All right, I think those were my 5 questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Did you see my face or?
Uh, I do not. I will. If you send me some of the like media on which it is your face, I can check it out.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you my latest one.
No, I get it because I'm actually in bed right now, so I look pretty terrible right now too.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Honestly, I look terrible too. Honestly, I'm like my hair is a bit off. I probably should shave. So I don't know.
Oh no, yeah, me too. Facial hair is a fucking pain in the ass, especially because I have
Oh,
acne.
wait,
So
yeah,
yeah.
acne.
Oh yeah,
Shit,
no, I have acne. Wait.
shit.
If you look at if you look at the images I sent it off topic, yeah, there's acne on my face.
Ah, dude, I have like I think it's acne growing on my face and everywhere now. So I don't blame you at
No,
all.
no, no. No, it's cool. I know the struggle. It's hard.
I like,
Sometimes it's sometimes it's fine. Other times it's like fucking bullshit.
oh yeah, it happens. You know, it happens. All right. Um. Well, you say your 5 questions. I've answered them. I've said my 10 questions. You answered them, and that'll be the end of this podcast. Then, if that's
All right.
with that being said, I'm going to take it away to meet for a conclusion, and we still focus this time.
All right. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I want to say something about him going into medical field. I did not expect it, and I should have asked more about it. But his reason for going into the medical field is wonderful. It's actually it's one of the greatest reasons you can have because you're personally affected by it. Because when you are in the field, when you are meeting with a patient, when you are participating in something as necessary as the medical field, as a scientific field, you need that personal connection to keep going, to care, to do what you need to do. You need a personal connection to it. I'm so glad to hear that his friend is okay, doing better than when he first started. And I do wish I could have expanded upon that. I do wish I could have expanded upon his life experience. Within the last couple of minutes, if you have noticed, Iltam is a complicated figure, ultimately in a good way. And I like Iltam more than ever because of that, because he has gone through struggle, he has gone through a lot. When you are going through a lot, it'll build you a wonderful character. It'll give you a path to the future. It'll give you something that ultimately will be beneficial in the long run for you and for others that are impacted by you. I see Iltam in the future working in Baltimore, working in Maryland, working in the United States, helping others. I see that person one day helping to save someone, maybe a lot of people, all because a friend was having heart problems. That's admirable. I'm focusing on this one thing when I could be talking about the Particracy side. I could be talking about their life experience, being in Korea, being a Korean American. I wish I could have spent it on that more. So I'll apologize for that. But I will say, Iltam being a complicated figure, ultimately for good, is that once you get to know him, once you get to talk to him, once you get to figure things out, if with him, with what he does, ultimately you'll get to like him more. I hope that this podcast will help with that. But the best thing to do, whether or not you're in Particracy, whether or not you know him in real life, best thing to do is just talk to him. Just talk to him. Just have a conversation with him about life, about his experience, about your experience. Because I have no doubt that at the end of the day, that he'll be an ultimate net good for our community and for the communities that he's in, that he contributed to, that he will be in the future. So I personally think that Iltam is, as I just said, a net good for our community. Hopefully one day I get to enjoy his interestingly flavored wine. But until then, I'll see you folks next time. Take care, everyone.